Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. I'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, All In Health and Wellness. If you're looking for a health coach, you're looking for a sports performance coach, you're looking for nutrition guidance, like for instance, a meal-by-meal plan that will help you understand how to eat. It will teach you how to eat, and it will give your body, your cells, the proper nutrition to feel great and be able to perform at your best, not just physically, but also emotionally and mentally. If you're looking for those things, you're looking for the key to improve your sports performance, both from a nutrition standpoint and an exercise physical standpoint and a mental standpoint as you approach your athletic event. All In Health and Wellness is able to help in these areas. Go to allinhealthandwellness.com and you'll find the contact information for how to get in touch with them and get started on the plan that will improve your life.
So thank you, Dr. Brandy, for being a guest on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
So we were talking a little bit before we started recording. You've got really dug into the cancer issue, in partially because of your own diagnosis and overcoming it. But there's so much that we can do on our own with cancer, right? When it comes to nutrition, when it comes to like taking care of our body, whether we are trying to prevent it or dealing with it after diagnosis, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that people don't realize, and I've even mentioned this to my oncologist, and just so your listeners know, I've had multiple myeloma for about 6.5 years. I've been on a plant-based diet for 6.5 years. I've been able to stay in a complete remission just on 2 oral medications. And all of that is described in my book, my whole personal story, and the way that I basically came to eating a plant-based diet. It was through the book How Not to Die by Michael Greger, which everybody should read. It's an amazing book. But what I even told my oncologist is that the National Cancer Institute recommends 9 servings of fruits and vegetables for the prevention of cancer. And I asked him, I go, why don't you just tell your patients to at least eat 9 servings of fruits and vegetables? Because none of them do it.
Yeah.
You know, I gave a huge lecture when I first kicked off my Natural Insights into Cancer website and so forth. And a woman came up to me afterwards. She had what I have, multiple myeloma, and she was definitely overweight. I mean, I would say she was obese. And she asked her doctor, should I change my diet? And he said, no, just keep eating the way you are. Just take your medication. You'll be fine.
Right.
And she looked at me and she said, Dr. Brandy, she said, I just knew that could not be correct, what he told me. And that's typically what you get from these oncologists. I mean, most people don't realize that when we go to medical school, we get about 2 weeks of nutrition training.
Right.
And it literally is like a junior high school health class. It's like, if you don't take vitamin C, you're going to get scurvy. If you don't get enough vitamin D, you're going to get rickets. And, nobody gets those nowadays. I always say Fruit Loops is fortified with vitamin C. But, my personal opinion is that if you need 9 servings of fruits and vegetables to prevent cancer, if you have it, you should be eating a hell of a lot more than 9 servings of fruits. Of fruits and vegetables. And the average American, there was a study that I frequently share with my followers on Instagram and also when I give lectures, is that the average American eats 1.8 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. And that's counting French fries and ketchup, believe it or not.
Oh my gosh.
And then when you look at fiber, this was a CDC study. Men between 30 and 50 did not hit 25 grams of fiber, and only 3% of women, which is really kind of mind-blowing. And that kind of goes really with the 1.8 servings of fruits and vegetables. I mean, if you increase your fruit and vegetable, legumes, nuts and seed consumption, you're automatically going to be over 25 grams. I mean, you and I probably eat 60, 70 grams of fiber per day, I would think.
Yeah.
If we actually calculated how much fiber we eat.
Right.
But but that's, as far as the dietary aspect, when I coach cancer patients, I really try to get them to eat a whole food,
Mhm.
plant-based diet. I don't like to use the word vegan.
Right.
You probably don't like that word either,
Yeah,
uh,
not a big fan.
because you can be eating uh, potato chips and drinking Coke all day and you're a
Yep.
vegan,
Right.
So I like to use the word whole food, plant-based.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, I'll use the word plant strong because I think
Mhm.
plant-based, it scares a lot of people. But
Right.
if they can kind of, switch out some of their animal protein for plant protein, it's definitely beneficial. In fact,
Yeah.
there's two really good substitution studies that came out. One was I think it was in 2019. It was a Japanese study. They looked at 70,000 people. They followed them over 16 years, and they only switched out 3%, which
Mhm.
isn't really a whole lot. And they found that the incidence of cardiovascular events decreased by 42%, which is
That's
pretty
phenomenal.
amazing.
Yeah.
Then it was the following study, following year, I think it was in 2020. Uh, they looked at 20,000 people, and they also switched out 3%
Mhm.
animal protein for 3% plant protein. And there was a 10% decrease in premature mortality in the group that switched out to the plant
Right.
protein.
Right.
And I don't know if you read there was recently, it just came out in the Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It just came out, looked at, it was meat protein versus dairy protein
Mhm.
versus plant protein. And it looked at kind of memory, cognition. It looked at chronic diseases, and it definitely showed that plant protein had way more benefits
Right.
than the animal protein or the dairy protein. So
Right.
so I think the evidence is very convincing. It's just hard convincing people because
Right.
everywhere you go into a restaurant, everybody's eating chicken and
Right.
shrimp and all kind of animal products, dairy products, and so
Well, and
forth.
you hit on something there that I think it's the latest buzzword since really since keto's sort of died off a little bit in the past couple of years is protein, right? Everybody's
Right.
like hyper like sensitive about where you get your protein. I get that question probably every
Oh,
day,
oh, oh, it's
and
constant.
and I'm just like I don't worry about my protein. Like I'm not this, and I'm an athlete, and I don't worry about where my protein comes from because I worry about where my food comes from.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, you have to be aware of it. I think some people that start eating whole food plant-based, um, they really don't have some of the awareness that they need. But
Mhm.
for instance, before I did this podcast, I grabbed a handful of walnuts and a handful of pecans because,
Right.
just for protein.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware, like I personally think people should eat a serving of legumes every day,
Right.
for protein, but also
Yeah.
it's been shown over and over again. If you look at cultures that eat more beans as a staple, they live the longest. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's been proven over and over again that beans are one of the most healthy foods really that you can consume.
Yeah.
And I know Dr. Greger actually recommends 3 servings. I tried that when I first started eating whole food plant-based, but that's pretty rough, and I was
Yeah.
actually gaining weight. So,
Yeah.
people are always worried about losing weight too. I mean,
Yeah.
if you eat 3 servings of beans every day, you're definitely, you're definitely going to gain some weight.
Yeah.
But but I myself, I don't really worry about protein, but I am aware, and you do need to be
Right.
aware. You just can't be eating, like vegetables all day, even
Yeah.
though many vegetables are loaded with protein. Like people don't
Right.
realize even an ear of corn
Mhm.
has 5 grams of fiber.
Yeah.
A potato. I'm actually going to do a video on the white potato because it's so maligned.
Yeah.
A white potato has 5 grams of protein.
Right.
People don't realize that. So if you're
Yeah.
eating a whole food plant-based diet, I mean, the chances that you are not getting enough protein is very, very minimal.
Mhm.
And in fact, the other thing that is really amazing, I did a post on an article that I read, and it just showed that it was an animal study,
Mhm.
and it was in I think it was the proceedings of I forget what, it was a European journal, but it was a fascinating study where they fed these rats. It was just sucrose and cornmeal.
Okay.
And they did radioactive isotope tracing on the carbon in the sucrose in the cornmeal. And they followed it all the way down to the microbiome.
Okay.
And the bifidobacteria actually converted, and this is hard to believe, they converted the sucrose in the cornmeal into essential amino acids.
Oh, cool.
And then they followed it into the bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
It became protein, then it became incorporated into muscle tissue. So,
right.
and really, when you think about it, if you think of grass-fed cows,
mm-hmm.
how do they get all that protein? It's probably through the gut microbiome that it's occurring.
Right.
I mean, this article, when I read it, it was just totally mind-blowing to me. I heard about it I was listening to a podcast by The Proof on Simon Hill. Was one of his guests that mentioned the article, and I kind of wrote it down. I went on to PubMed, read it, and then I actually did a video on my Instagram site, Cancer Veggie Doc. So it's fascinating that if you're taking care of your gut microbiome, mm-hmm. you are definitely going to be healthy, and you're going to get enough protein, even if you don't put it in your mouth. So,
well, and that's because that's how the gut works if it's working properly, right? Because it's gonna break down everything and find those little nuggets, the essential amino acids or the nutrients that you need, and get them into the bloodstream. And so it's not a matter of like, I've got to eat this massive steak full of protein to then convert that to protein in my body, because it doesn't have the fiber content. It doesn't have the other stuff that your gut's looking for.
Absolutely. And it's really, the gut microbiome is kind of an area that I've focused on of late. In fact, I'm writing a second edition to my book. My book, by the way, for your listeners, called Beat Back Cancer Naturally. Get it on Amazon.
Yeah.
But what's really fascinating about the gut microbiome, for your listeners that don't know, there's about 37 trillion bacteria in your large colon. Mm-hmm. And you have about 37 trillion cells in your body, which is kind of crazy. Then when you look at all of the bacteria, for instance, in your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your skin, you have about 100 trillion bacteria. So you have 3 times as many bacteria in your mm-hmm. ecosystem than you do cells in your body, which is really quite amazing.
Yeah.
But when you are eating an adequate amount of fiber, which we have already discussed, most Americans aren't even getting close to even 25 grams. I mean, women should be getting about 30 grams, men should be getting about 35 grams of fiber per day, and they're really not even getting close to that. But the fiber goes all the way down into the large colon. There's beneficial bacteria. There's about mm-hmm. 500 subspecies. They're under the Prevotella heading. And then you have about 500 subspecies under the Bacteroides heading, and those are pathogenic bacteria. So when you're eating more high fiber foods, the beneficial bacteria start proliferating. Mm-hmm. And this happens very quickly. In fact, David Lawrence and his group, they did a study where they put one group on just a whole food plant-based diet, they put the other group on a carnivore diet. Mm-hmm. And even in one day, the kind of the ratio between the beneficial bacteria and the pathogenic bacteria start changing. So the people on the whole plant-based diet, the beneficial bacteria start proliferating. They start snuffing out the pathogenic bacteria. And then on the other hand, when they were eating the carnivore diet, even at day 1, the pathogenic bacteria start really proliferating. For instance, Hungatella, which is a bacteria that produces a lot of TMAO. Mm-hmm. That thing just started like proliferating at a very high rate. There's another one called Bilophilo-Wadsworthia, which has been definitely correlated with ulcerative colitis. That bacteria start proliferating even in one day. Right. So when they looked at these patients at 5 days after they were on these different diets, I mean, their microbiome was completely different, even in 5 days. Yeah. So you can alter that very quickly just by changing the way that you're eating. But the thing that has fascinated me the most about the microbiome, you've probably always heard that your gut controls like 70% of your immune function.
Right.
And I really never understood exactly what that meant. Yeah. And as I got into this, you have one layer of colon cells. Mm-hmm. They call them colonocytes. And these beneficial bacteria actually send signals across the one layer of colonocytes to your immune cells, to your white cells, your T cells, your regulatory T cells. And they actually tell them where to go, how hard to fight. For instance, if you're getting an autoimmune situation, and your inflammation is really getting out of control, it'll tell your T regulatory cells to kind of back off on the inflammation. So I really never understood that until I really started delving into this. And it really, it kind of all made sense, because like all the literature was showing that, people that eat more whole food plant-based, they seem to be healthier, they have less cancer rates, they have less cardiovascular disease, chronic diseases, type 2 diabetes and so forth.
Right.
But the other thing that was interesting is that you also would read articles that people that ate plant-based had better, cognition. They had like a better mental attitude, better emotions.
Right.
And then I started reading that these gut bacteria actually secrete 90% of your serotonin and 50% of your dopamine. So so it all makes sense. So for your listeners, serotonin is your happy hormone, and when you take an antidepressant, that's a serotonin uptake inhibitor. But just think of it, when you take an antidepressant, you're really not increasing your serotonin, you're just increasing the amount of serotonin like in the extracellular space. But when you eat a more of a plant-rich diet, you're actually increasing the amount of serotonin, which is your happy hormone. And then dopamine also is a kind of a happy hormone, which is about 50% of that is actually coming from the gut microbiome. So it's really fascinating, and it kind of tied in everything that I knew about plant-based diets. And as I started to really study about the gut microbiome, it all kind of made sense.
Yeah. Well, and that is fascinating, because I didn't realize that the bacteria was talking to the immune cells. Like that's
I mean, it's
that
crazy.
like opens a door that's like, oh my gosh, okay, what it's like the link between what I eat and how I feel later, like really makes a lot more sense now. And not just like, okay, I ate something that I'm quote unquote allergic to, but something that the bacteria doesn't like or is not gonna enjoy to proliferate. And it's just like, no wonder I'm gonna have these effects 2 days later or 3 days later, that I'm like, my body's just feeling sluggish and down. And it's because that connection between the two of them, it's not I mean, it can be other things obviously too, but like that's where it starts.
Oh, absolutely. And we know there was a really good study that Uwe Shaw did, Sloan Kettering, and it was actually about multiple myeloma, what I have. And it kind of put a lot of things to rest, because there's a website that I go on, it's called smartpatients.com, and it's, you can go in there and they'll have different disease processes, if you have myeloma, if you have pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, whatever. And then it's kind of a chat room. And one thing I've always noticed is anytime, I would bring something up about lifestyle, diet, and so forth, like the conversation just kind of shuts down. Like people just don't want to hear about it. And then when you talk about the next drug, it's like everything lights up and everybody's like, talking about the next drug. And I am not against conventional medicine. In fact, I did a video on my Instagram where I actually urged people to use both. Don't throw, use conventional medicine, but also do all the alternative things that that I write about in my book, basically a whole food plant-based diet. There's targeted supplements that I recommend. Daily exercise is like incredibly important, making sure you get good sleep, keeping your stress down, taking care of your gut microbiome, and then detoxing, which we can talk about a little later if you want to get into that. But in Uwe Shaw's article, what they did is these people were in complete remissions from multiple myeloma. So she put one group on a whole food plant-based diet. And remember, this is at Sloan Kettering. This is a major university that treats cancer patients. One group was on a whole food plant-based diet. The other one was just on a standard American diet. And what the study showed, that the people that were on the plant-based diet, they all stayed in a complete remission, and the people that were on the standard American diet, like a high percentage of them actually came out of remission. So I put that on the Smart Patients website, and it kind of like it kind of made people started to think, and then the
Yeah.
conversation started to light up a little bit because, it came out of Sloan Kettering,
Right.
and this study was very definitive. So UV Shaw is really quite incredible. In fact, she got into this whole thing. I think she was in her residency and she got diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. That's how she that's Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yeah.
That's how she got interested in this whole thing with, diet and so forth. But once again, I do want your listeners to understand that I am not against conventional
Right.
medicine. I do think that when you are doing some of these lifestyle changes, I think you can go on a little bit of a lower dose because the lifestyle changes do make, I think, a big difference in your prognosis. You have to put effort into it. It's not something that just happens.
Yeah.
But that's kind of my general philosophy. And there are people on social media that tell people not to do conventional medicine. And I will tell you, I have seen some horror stories just in my own practice where, one woman, for example, when she was 29, she got diagnosed with breast cancer. So she did the Gerson therapy. And it's like you drink juices. I think it's like every 2 hours, you do 6 coffee. I don't even know how these people even like survive 6 coffee enemas. I mean, and there's certain foods you avoid, like soy foods you avoid, which soy is probably one of the best things you can eat when you have cancer.
Yeah.
So she did this for 10 months and it just kept getting worse and worse. Then she went to another alternative clinic in, I think it was in Austin, Texas. And they did mistletoe, I think it was ozone, and might have been vitamin C treatments. I think they were the 3 that they did. And it just kept getting worse. And then by the time she came to me, she was like stage 4.
Oh, wow.
And by the time you get to stage 4, I mean, that cancer is on a roll.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't realize like one centimeter tumor, that's 1 billion cells, just 1 centimeter.
Yeah.
So you get into stage 4, I mean, you have trillions of cancer cells that are just going, and they've developed mutations, adaptations and so forth. So I told her, I said, listen, you need to get on some conventional therapy, and I'll give you some recommendations on what you can do to help that. But her husband, I think it was like 6 months later, I get a text message. It was around Christmas time. She passed away, 33 years old. And
wow.
and I have seen this several times where people tried to just do things alternatively without doing the conventional, and they really end up in a really super bad situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's sort of like for the people that, that take care of their vehicles, right? You have a vehicle. Well, you can see the tires are wearing down. Okay, change the tires. You can't see the oil, unless you check the dipstick every now and then. But if you don't change the oil, we know the car's going to blow up.
Oh
the
yeah,
engine's
for
going to
sure.
stop. And so it's a combination of doing the things that you can see and doing the things that you can't see. And it's sort of the same way as like, okay, well, if in that study, like, I think that opens like everybody's mind to it, is like, okay, well, if you already have cancer and you're in remission, and then you do all the lifestyle changes and everything stays in remission, okay, well, why wouldn't you want to do that if going back to the diet that got you cancer or participating in getting you cancer is going to give you a chance for that to come back? Like, why would you do that?
Exactly. Yeah. And I even say in my book, like when you get into remission, it's almost like you're getting a second chance.
Yeah.
What would you do differently than what you did before? Like I was always under a whole lot of stress, and I really had to learn how to reduce that. Now I've had a recent incident, I shared this on my Instagram site. My wife died like 4.5 months ago in a bicycle accident. And I had to really actually read my chapter on stress reduction.
Right.
To really, make sure I was doing the deep breathing, because I wasn't doing it. I was like doing very shallow breathing. So in my book, I talk about, taking a count to 4 when you breathe in, hold it for 8, then blow it out, over 8. And I usually just kind of blow it out and then just take the next breath when I feel like I need to take the next breath.
Right.
But that automatically kicks in your parasympathetic nervous system. It calms you down. I pray more. You just have to learn. And studies do show that your whole emotional and spiritual health is really super important for getting a good result when
Right.
you have cancer.
Right.
It's not easy to do, but you need to practice, certain techniques and so forth to really get yourself in a position where you are taking care of your parasympathetic nervous system. You're slowing your breathing down, you're taking deep breaths, the heart goes down, the blood pressure comes down. Because I will tell you, my oncologist even warned me. He said, listen, I've had people that have lost spouses that their myeloma numbers tripled in a month,
Oh,
in
wow.
1 month, just from the stress.
Yeah.
So it's something that you really need to, focus on. And it is one of the 5 precepts that I write about in my book.
Well, and that, I mean, it just goes to show there's so many different things out there that can be a part of what's either causing you to get sick or like causing you to get sick again, right? Like there's so many things out there that we need to focus on and like get away from a little bit of just the busyness of life and the craziness of life. And sometimes we got to
Oh,
just
yeah.
go like, okay, I only got one body. I need to take care of it and do the things that make me feel better, not necessarily the things that just keep me in the cog and the wheel of everybody else's lives.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I really try to focus on, and it is another chapter that I'm putting in the second edition that I really did ignore, not totally, but I really should have focused on it more, is really, kind of preventing the toxins from coming in, because we are
Right.
bombarded every day. And I think that's one of the reasons why the colon cancer rates are just going off the wall in young people right now.
Yeah.
And also the way they're eating, there's a lot of obesity and so forth. But
Right.
the thing that I really try to, one thing I tell all of my patients is make sure you get some kind of a water purifier on your tap water, because you would not believe what is in your tap water. My mother, she died of leukemia when she was 57 years old. This was back in 1990, and I remember when she got diagnosed, we were very concerned about her, and we obviously wanted her to survive. So we had a water filter company come in.
Yeah.
And I remember they put 2 electrodes in the tap water, and literally 33% of the water precipitated out, like it became solid.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it totally blew my mind.
Wow.
So then I called the water authority. I wanted to see, could you send me a list of what the hell's in the water? Because like what I saw blew my mind.
Yeah.
So initially they didn't send it. Then I had to call them again. Then they finally sent it. It was like 3 pages, double columns. I mean, there are heavy metals in there. There's prescription dry. You wouldn't believe all the stuff that's in your water.
Yeah.
So one of the things I tell people is listen, and my cancer patients when I'm coaching them is you have to get a water filter.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the best water filter, even if you get like a Brita on top of your, counter. I mean, I personally think people should get like a reverse osmosis, underneath the sink. They're a little bit more expensive, but I do think that is really one of the most important things that you can do to help yourself eliminate a lot of the toxins coming in. And then I usually recommend like an air filter. Like I run an air filter in my bedroom in the kind of the living area. I do think it's important to do that.
Yeah.
And then also to really take care of your liver. Mistletoe, I'm sorry, milk thistle is one of the supplements that I do recommend.
Yeah.
It really helps the phase 1 of detox, because that's the other thing. You're exposed to the toxins. And one thing people do not realize, and we talked about it a little bit before we started this podcast, is that by the time a woman leaves the house and she puts all her creams and her shampoo on, she already has 168 chemicals in her bloodstream.
Right.
And it's 85.
Yeah.
So I actually have a toxin-free skincare line on my website. I have 12 different products on there.
Yeah.
And basically what I did when I was developing the line, I went to ewg.org, environmentalworkinggroup.org, and then I would type in different ingredients, and then they have different scores. So if it's a 10, it's really bad. If it's a 1, it's like super good. If it's like a 4 or above, it's bad. So everything in my products are like a 3 or less.
Yeah.
So that way, when you're putting your skin products on and so forth, that you're not creating, any toxicity, in your body. So once you're exposed to these toxins, which it's pretty hard to totally eliminate them, then you have to take care of how can you help your body to get rid of these things and metabolize them. So you basically have a phase 1 and phase 2 metabolism in your liver. Milk thistle will help your phase 1. Your phase 2, if you eat a lot of cruciferous vegetables, that really helps your phase 2 enzymes. And a glutathione transferase is one of them. And glutathione, I think most of your listeners probably know, is really probably one of the most important antioxidants in your body. So when you're eating a lot of cruciferous vegetables, you're actually jacking up your glutathione. But glutathione transferase is one of the enzymes in the phase 2. So phase 1 basically converts it into a metabolite that phase 2 then converts into a water-soluble metabolite. And then it basically goes either to your colon,
right,
to your kidney, or through the sweat.
Mm-hmm.
So sweating is extremely important to try to do on a day. You're an exercise guy, so you probably sweat all the time.
Right.
In the weather we've been having lately, a lot of people are getting some good detox.
Right.
It's been pretty hot this summer. But I actually get into an infrared sauna every night for about 30 minutes. And then make sure that you take some kind of electrolyte drink. I actually have something on my website. It's called Hydrate. It has the basic minerals that are really, people don't realize you lose a lot of like sodium, chromium. I mean, there's a selenium. There's a lot of minerals that are actually excreted when you sweat, but you're getting rid of like a ton of toxins. So, so just make sure that when you get into a sauna or you do heavy sweating, that you do some kind of electrolyte, replacement. I think that is extremely important. And then, as far as the kidney, that's drinking purified water. So, if you have a water purifier, make sure you're drinking a lot, because a lot of these toxins are excreted through the kidney. And then fiber. So that's another reason to eat fiber. Not only does it help the gut microbiome be healthy, but it helps get rid of a lot of toxins through the feces. So they're the ways that I really talk to my patients, about helping them to actually get rid of the toxins, because there's no way you are going to totally eliminate toxins. There's so many that it's just totally impossible. So you really have to focus on minimizing them, but then also help your body to actually get rid of them. So
because it's really about, from a cancer standpoint, like it's layman's terms, it's about like we're producing cancer cells every day, because a cancer cell is basically an abnormal cell. And it becomes cancerous because our body's too confused or busy with other processes to go, oh, that one's bad, let me go ahead and get rid of it and move it along its way. And then it gets the opportunity to grow and connect with the runs around them, and then you get a tumor. But like, because our body's it's like we're in a traffic jam of all the other things we're trying to deal with, when if we just drink enough water, but drink the right kind of water that's not polluted or got more toxins in it than we need, make sure that we're getting the right vitamins, minerals, things to move stuff along, fiber to move stuff along, then when those bad cells happen, our body can address it and get rid of it and not be stuck doing other things, right?
Well, that's why even sleep is extremely important, because that's when a lot of the DNA repair occurs.
Right.
You're getting hit. When I first got diagnosed, I read an article in Nature by Mikhail Munchke. He's a famous cancer researcher. And he said, by the time you're diagnosed with, for instance, what I have, myeloma, he said you have 5,000 DNA mutations in that cancer cell. He said, he said by the time you relapse, you have about 12,000. So what I really try to inform my patients that are in remission is you really have to keep you're never going to totally eliminate them. I mean, you get about 19,200 hits to your DNA every day. It's about 800 hits per hour.
Yeah.
And so you really need to minimize the number of DNA mutations. The best way to do that is when you eat a whole food plant-based diet, you are eating a very rich antioxidant diet. I mean, plants have 63 times the antioxidant power compared to animal products. So automatically, when you're eating more plants, you're definitely going to be decreasing the DNA mutations. And then the supplements that I recommend are like very potent antioxidants. So that's one of the things I recommend to people that get into remission. I think that's why even in Uwe Shaw's article, her study that she did, the people in the plant-based group had it, they all stayed in a complete remission. It's not only due to the gut microbiome creating all these short chain fatty acids that are very anti-cancer, but it was also the fact that they were eating a very rich antioxidant diet.
Right.
So when you're sleeping, that's when a lot of your DNA repair is going on. So, any of these DNA mutations that occurred are, your body's really fixing them,
Right.
while you're asleep. And that's why sleep is one of the 5 precepts that I talk about. And you really have to get in a habit of, getting to bed at the same time, make sure everything's dark, get away from the phones and so forth, like an hour
Right.
before you go to sleep, keep the room kind of like around 69, degrees, kind of a little bit more on the colder side.
Yeah.
But you really, and I'm a strong proponent of melatonin. I actually have, I think, about 3 pages in my book on melatonin. Most people don't realize that melatonin helps you get to sleep.
Right.
But melatonin also is it's the most potent antioxidant in your body, number one.
Oh, wow.
And number two, I mean, there are study after study after study that show it has a very potent anti-cancer effect. So while you're sleeping, I mean, your body is really taking care of a lot of cancer. And we do know that, for instance, night shift workers, if you go through the literature, I mean, they have much higher cancer rates, and people that have, sleep disorders and so forth, disturbances, I mean, they have much higher cancer rates compared to people that don't. In fact, I just did I'm going to be editing it soon on ashwagandha. And when I was doing the research, ashwagandha is one of the, herbs that really does help you with stress and sleep and so forth. And I think it was lung adenocarcinoma. And it was basically showing that people that had sleep disturbances had much higher incidence, and ashwagandha was something that helped them, get to sleep. So, but melatonin, I typically recommend to start, if you're somebody that doesn't metabolize melatonin well, there's something called herbatonin. You can get it on Amazon. It's 0.3 milligrams. But I really try to get people up to about 21 milligrams before they go to bed. I mean, I personally take about 60 milligrams before I go to bed. And studies do show that when, like, for instance, if I have a stage 4 cancer patient, I recommend melatonin 60 milligrams 4 times per day. And if they're going in for a CAT scan or a PET scan where there's a lot of ionizing radiation, I recommend 100 milligrams before they go in. I mean, there's about 35 different rodent studies that show that when you expose the rodent to ionizing radiation, like what you get with CAT scans, X-rays, and so forth, if you give them melatonin before they're exposed to it, the number of DNA mutations goes down, dramatically. So people need to know that when you get a PET scan, and some of these oncologists throw these PET scans around like they're like water. It's like, oh, you got back pain. Okay, let's get a PET scan. And I tell my patients, listen, don't agree to any scans unless you 100% need the scan. Just don't get it willy-nilly, because every time you do that, you're definitely being exposed to radiation. You're going to get, there's some DNA mutations, and remember, that's what's going to kick you out of remission. It's the number of mutations that you get, because your body your cancer cells will start adapting through these mutations and so forth. And like the thing's going to kickstart. And if it kickstarts, it's going to be a lot harder to treat the second time than it is the first time. So, so sleep is extremely important. And that's why, you're an exercise guy. I know you told me, before we started, but that's why I stress exercise, because when you exercise, that's kind of the king of the lifestyle changes, because when you exercise daily, your stress goes down. I mean, how many people have felt like the world was caving in on them, and then they took a run and it was like, hey, everything's fine.
Right.
And then also there's several studies that show when you are exercising, you sleep better. So, we were just talking about sleep, that's very important. So we also know that when you exercise, it jacks up your immune function. In fact, one of the studies that I had in my book, 6 minutes of exercise increases your natural killer cell activity. They're the cells that kill cancer cells by 50%. So when some of my patients, they go, I don't have time to exercise. I go, would you have 6 minutes? I have this little band routine that I do, and it's like a 3-minute video that I make, and I send it to all my patients after I do a consult. And and in fact, I just did it before I came on to this podcast. Like today, I've been running around. We're going on a cruise on Friday, so I've been like packing and all kind of stuff.
Right.
And I usually ride my bike every day, and then I do my band routine, which I can get through in about 20 minutes. But I tell patients, listen, if you only have 6 minutes, just cut this little band routine that I do, and it hits every muscle group. It hits the,
Right.
the biceps, the triceps, the back, the abs,
Right.
legs, so forth. I said, just cut it in half. I mean, like, you can do the whole thing in like, 10 minutes. And I had a big discussion with one of my friends the other day. He was trying to get me to go to this gym. I do everything at home.
Right.
And I even talk about in my book, don't feel like you have to go to a gym, because you're really putting like so many roadblocks in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta dress, then you gotta drive there, then you get there, then you run into somebody, then you chit chat, then you gotta drive home, then you gotta take a shower. It's like, something that you could do in 10 minutes, it took you 2 hours.
Right.
So that's something that I tell people, don't feel like you have to go to a gym, because, many times if you just can like figure out what to do at home, I just ride my bike around my neighborhood. It's like a 6-mile trek, and I get back and I come back, and then I usually do my band routine right after that. And then I take a shower. So, so it's something that is extremely important. And one of the other things that really is important is to make sure you're doing resistance exercise, because, as you get older, and I'm sure you tell your clients this, when you hit 30, if you're not doing resistance training, you're losing about 0.5% of your muscle mass every year. So that means every decade you're losing like 5% of your muscle mass.
Yeah.
So just figure that out. I mean, like you're losing 5%. I would say by the time you hit like 50, you've lost 10%. By the time you're 70, you've lost. So people don't realize, especially cancer patients, is that when you lose muscle mass, you become insulin resistant.
Right.
The insulin doesn't work as well. It kind of mucks up the insulin receptors from lack of muscle mass, and also saturated fat does the same thing. And then, so the insulin doesn't work as well, the insulin levels jack up, and then also the sugar levels jack up. And one thing your listeners need to know is insulin is one of the most powerful growth factors for cancer. So you definitely want to keep your insulin levels low. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard that, cancer loves sugar.
Right. Yep.
So when your muscles are deteriorating, you are becoming insulin resistant. The insulin levels go up. That's going to help the cancer to grow better. And then also your sugar levels are going to go up, and that's going to help the cancer to go like amok. Right. So it's really important to do that resistance training every day.
Yeah. Well,
at least 2 to 3 times per week.
The other thing that, muscles feed off of glucose.
Yeah.
So if you don't have muscle, and your muscle's declining, but you're continuing to eat, the same diet that you ate when you were 22, especially for guys, we're 22, we're invincible, we can eat anything, and it just, we keep getting stronger. And then, like you said, you hit 30 and life's changed, because now you're, at the job all day long, you've got kids, the routine's different, you're not sleeping as well, and you're not working out anymore. And that muscle, your weight may either stay the same or start to increase. But your composition's changing drastically.
Absolutely. In fact, in the one video that I made, it kind of shows like a muscle. It's like a cross section of a thigh muscle, and it shows like at 30, and then it shows like at 50, and it shows it like 70. So like the circumference can be exactly the same,
right?
But you got the bone in there,
and
then on the person that's like 25 or 30, they got all this muscle and there's a little bit of fat around there. And then the person that's 70, you got the bone, you got a little bit of muscle, then you have all this fat around it. So, and we do, I'm sure you tell your clients that, muscle metabolizes much better than like fat tissue. So that's one of the reasons why, as people age, their metabolism goes down. And that's something that you can definitely correct just by increasing your muscle mass.
Right.
I'm 71 years old, and I don't have an ounce of fat on me. I got a 6-pack, and I'm 71. So, so I mean, it's just consistency and making sure that you're always, kind of doing some resistance on your muscles. I think that's
Right.
really, really, really super important.
Right. Well, and so, one of the other things, so I just saw this actually this morning in an email I got from another organization that was talking about cancer and how the risk and the chances of you getting cancer have increased so much since the 70s to where now, like, the chances of you getting cancer are somewhere around 50%.
Oh,
And,
yeah, right.
and back there it was like, it was 10 to 15%. But it's exponentially increasing. And so, like, within a decade, it's going to be like your chances of not getting cancer are going to be very slim if you're not doing everything to combat
Oh,
and prepare
absolutely. In fact,
yourself, right?
The World Health Association organization came up with something. It was like by 2050. I mean, I can't remember the exact number, but it was a crazy number what they predicted the cancer rates were going to be. And I think a lot of it has to do with obesity, though. Like when my daughter and I, we were in a restaurant last night, and I was just looking around at like all the people in there. I mean, I would say like 90% of the people were overweight in there. And it's just become an epidemic. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the way that we are eating a lot of ultra processed foods. And I will say, I don't care if you're, keto, vegan, paleo, whatever in the hell you are, like, and I hate all these battles and so forth that go
Right.
on
Yep.
social media.
Yep.
But I think we all agree that you have to eliminate ultra processed foods.
Yep.
In fact, one of the 16-year studies that there were three of them that I know very well was on ultra. They followed people for 16 years, and people that ate a lot of ultra processed foods, donuts, chips, and so forth, versus
Right.
people that ate more whole foods, they had a 62% greater chance of premature death, and most of it was cancer.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is these ultra processed foods.
Mm-hmm.
People are obese, and when you have a lot of visceral fat, and that's the fat that's around your organs, not the fat under your skin.
Yeah.
They release a lot of pro-inflammatory cytokines, and there's one part in my book where I talk about the causes of cancer, and inflammation is extremely important for cancer to be able to proliferate. I mean, you can't even get a cancer cell to start proliferating unless there's inflammation. So when you get all of that visceral fat, you release these cytokines. They create a lot of inflammation in your body, and that's like a setup for getting cancer. And I think that's one of the reasons why colon cancer rates have just gone off the wall in young people. I mean, I think it's I think it's a lot of the visceral fat, obesity, the ultra processed foods that they're eating, lack of fiber, because they're eating all these ultra processed foods, and they're exposed to all these toxins, which they're probably not exercising and sweating and getting rid of all of these in their body. And then also a lot of these people are getting type 2 diabetes. I mean, right now, like 30% of the population either has diabetes or pre-diabetes. So it's really rampant in our country. And it's really, a lot of it is due to the diet and the fact that most people, I think it's like 60% of people are either overweight or obese in the United States. And that kind of correlates with what I saw in that restaurant, is you just look around and it's just like, it's hard to see someone my age or your age with a slim waist.
Yeah.
Almost every guy has a beer belly. I mean, it's just like accepted as, okay, that's like normal, and it isn't.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
Yeah. Well, and it's it's even like more interesting to go watch, because now that we've got, decades of television and decades of people on video, to go watch a show from the 70s or 80s. And yeah, the jokes are different, and the culture is a little bit different and all that. But look at the people in the show, and like there may be one person that you can go, okay, that person's overweight.
Yeah.
The
problem back then, though, the problem back then, though, they were all smoking. In fact, I watched
that too.
I watched my sister and her husband, they like old stuff, and they actually have a VHS player in their house. And we were talking about Frank Sinatra, and it got onto this Frank Sinatra roast that they had. Dean Martin was like the host.
Yeah.
It was 1977, and it was crazy. Like every single one of them had a cigarette.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra's sitting there, there's like smoke coming up from his, so I mean, that was a problem back then. And I think
Sure.
everybody knows they shouldn't be smoking. And the other
Right.
thing they shouldn't be doing is drinking alcohol,
Right.
because I mean, there was a really good study in the International Journal of Cancer, and they looked at 572 different studies, 79,000 different cancers, and what they found was even moderate alcohol intake increases the chances of getting every type of cancer. So,
Oh, wow.
so I always tell people, even this red wine thing that people think is healthy for them, it is
Yeah.
not healthy. In fact,
Right.
in my book, I kind of and I think that has been put to rest when they did the original studies on that. I mean, they were counting most of the teetotalers were people that had like cirrhosis, had fatty liver disease, and they weren't drinking any alcohol because they were like really sick people. And when they really did later studies, they find that, that really anybody, that was called the French paradox. They repeated a lot of those studies, and they found that people that didn't drink at all or never drank at all had much lower rates of cardiovascular disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, and so forth. So, so that's the other thing. You can't smoke, and definitely you can't be drinking alcohol, and even moderate alcohol. I mean, I think everyone in the cancer field knows that even like one drink a day increases your breast cancer rate fairly significantly. So, so that's another thing that I really stress to my patients, that really try to cut the alcohol, and that is something that is cultural.
Oh, totally.
And, it's funny, anytime I do a post on Instagram, if it has to do with alcohol, it usually doesn't get a whole lot of likes, because like people love their alcohol. It's like, but I think it is changing. I think millennials are starting to really, I mean, there's been a little bit of a movement lately where it's not cool to drink. So, so hopefully that'll continue. So,
well, and I think one of the things that if people haven't heard in the past couple of years, I mean, I want to say it's just the past couple of years that colon cancer has overtaken lung cancer, right? Is like the commonality.
It's a second. Right. It's rampant. It's crazy.
And that's, I think everybody understands that, smoking and lung cancer, they connect the dots, right? In like connecting the dot between now, the ultra processed foods and colon cancer, like you said, the research is there, and it shows that it may not be the only cause, but it's definitely, driving the train faster and faster.
Yeah, when you look at cultures that eat more whole food, plant-based, and if you, for instance, I'm sure you're familiar with the blue zones, or the 5 areas of the world where people live the longest. Icaria, Greece, Sardinia, Nicoya in Costa Rica, Loma Linda in Okinawa. And I always like to use Loma Linda because it's in California. They have basically the same culture and so forth. But that's where a lot of 7-day Adventists live, and a lot of them are whole food, plant-based, or vegetarian. And women in Loma Linda live about 10 years longer than their American counterparts, and men live about 14 years longer. And they have much lower colon cancer rates compared to people that are eating like a standard American diet. In fact, I think it was in 2017, it was the Adventist Health Study 2. I mean, they showed very definitively that the people that were eating whole food, plant-based, or vegetarian had much lower cancer rates compared to the people that were eating more of a standard American diet. So, the evidence is very, very, convincing. And that's really one of the reasons, like I told you before, like men between 30 to 50, 0% are hitting even 25 grams of fiber. So, like you jack, and it's really not that hard to jack that up. In fact, there's one study, it was 2014, it was a meta-analysis. They looked at 42 studies, and they showed that for every 10 grams of increase in fiber, it decreased your cardiovascular events by like 17%. 10 grams, that's like 1 cup of lentils. I mean, it's not that hard to get 10 grams.
Yeah.
So if you start eating, for instance, like a serving of beans every day, you're going to put yourself in a really, really good situation. You're going to feel better. You might be passing gas for a few weeks, but you'll get used to that. Sure, you tell your clients that. But once your gut microbiome kind of adapts to that, like, it really isn't an issue for me at all. And most of my patients, after a while, it's really not an issue. But just 10 grams. for
Yeah.
every 10 grams. So it was for every 10 grams. So if you increased it by 20 grams, you decreased it by 34%. So
Wow.
it was really like a fascinating meta-analysis that they did in 2014. So getting that fiber isn't that important, but you have to make a conscious effort. And that's what I was
Right.
telling you before. You just can't like say I'm vegan and then you eat like crap food all day.
Right.
It just doesn't
Yeah.
work that way. You really have to make sure you're getting your nuts and your seeds, you're getting your legumes, make sure you're getting your whole grains, your fruits and your vegetables. If you're doing all that, you're getting plenty of protein, you're getting a ton of fiber, you're getting a lot of antioxidants. And you're going to be a lot healthier if you take that approach.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. And well, we're getting close to I want to respect your time, getting close to the time limit here. So Natural Insights into Cancer, that's your website, your project that you're trying to help people understand how to prevent and beat cancer if you've already got the diagnosis, correct?
Right. And I have an Instagram that's very, very active. I have 122,000 followers on there. I do an educational video every fourth post.
Right.
Right. I do. And I keep it about a minute because most people's attention span nowadays doesn't
Right.
go beyond a minute. And then every fourth video in between, I repost famous vegan chefs.
Oh, cool.
That have like crazy amazing recipes, because like when you tell somebody to eat whole food plant-based, like, okay, where the hell do I start?
Right.
So when I do a consult, I'll send them a letter and I'll give them a bunch of different cookbooks. But I think it's important. That's why I do that every fourth post. In between my educational videos, I always do like a vegan recipe post.
Right.
So I get some of the best vegan chefs in the world, and I'll just do a repost. I'll find something that I think would be beneficial to them.
Right.
So my Instagram is Cancer Veggie Doc, VEGGIE Doc, DOC. My Instagram is Natural Insights into Cancer.com. I have a really big shopping cart on there. I have like 12 different supplements, 12 different skincare products that they can do. But all my videos are on the website and they're also on my Instagram. Awesome.
Well, yeah, and I'll be sure to link all that stuff. I was going through your Instagram a little bit, and like, yeah, it's this, the stuff is spot on, and I agree with you. When people ask, like, oh, I'm plant-based, and they're like, well, you just eat salads all day? I'm like, no, it's so much more than that.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. I got in a discussion with, I went out with a couple that I know that they're plant-based, and we were talking about cooked versus raw. And, I get into this all the time. I say, you know what, eat both. I mean,
right.
You want to have a life that's like high quality. And even though you lose about 15% of the phytonutrients in general, when you cook, you do break down the cellular wall. So a lot of the phytonutrients get absorbed. Sometimes when you eat raw all the time, the cell wall is not broken down.
Right.
And then the other thing is I always use spinach as an example. If you have a bowl full of like leafy spinach and you eat that, there's X volume, but cook it, all of a sudden that's like 10% of the volume.
Right.
So even if you bring that up to like 20% of the volume, you're probably getting more phytonutrients in the long run. So I tell people, and you well know, there's some phytonutrients that get absorbed better when you cook, like lycopene in tomatoes. You get more absorbed when you actually cook it. So I tell people eat raw, eat cooked, eat a lot of beans, get your nuts and seeds, get your whole grains. You're going to be great.
Right. Yep. No, I fully agree. Well, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Brandy, for being a guest, and whatever I can do to help you in the future and help promote what you're doing, because I think it's vital with where our current prognosis for our country is going. It's not good.
Oh, yeah.
We need you and others like you to keep promoting and doing what you're doing.
I appreciate it. Hey, it was great.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.